I'm Alan Robarge, a relationship coach. Welcome to Improve Your Relationships, where I like to talk about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. And on this video, let's talk about our own emotional discomfort when our needs are not being met. And this is a very common scenario that happens in relationships, and it snowballs and snowballs and gets out of hand to the point that it's undermining trust, and it is actually detrimental to the relationship. And what I'm talking about is our inability to handle our own discomfort and our own panic and our own distress and our own anxiety and our own profound disappointments, our emotional disappointments, when the relationship is not delivering at the level of emotional connection that we believe should be happening, or that we believe that we deserve, or that we believe or that we know is possible. And for whatever reasons, it's not happening. When emotional attunement, emotional harmony, the technical term is limbic resonance, when we're not experiencing this degree of open and shared vulnerability, it can create some mistrust, some concern, some caution. And if perhaps you have an attachment injury, which means your nervous system is very hyper attuned to notice the ebbs and flows of closeness and separation, and that if you are perceiving that you're somehow not the priority any longer in your relationship, or if your partner is not picking up on your invitations to create vulnerable connection, we then naturally have a response. So yes, of course, that is normal. We have a response. The piece we have to be aware of is that if our nervous system is very highly tuned to notice the frequency of connection and the frequency of disconnection, it just means that we're going to be essentially more on edge, or more alert, or even at times more triggered when we notice these shifts. So this is about, the point of this video is, how do you manage those shifts, and how do you at certain times comfort yourself, soothe yourself, and walk yourself through the trigger of either perceiving that emotional connection is being denied, or if in fact it's you could assess the situation and conclude that yes, there is some withholding or being denied emotional connection. Even if you can see the pattern in your partner, even if you can see how your partner is contributing and maybe even initiated some form of behavior that created the emotional distance, the moment it is activated in you in the sense of distress, discomfort, a fear, it could even show up as a panic. When you are activated in your nervous system, and that now you feel that you are being treated in an unfair way, or you're being treated in a hurtful way, in those moments, that is about you. That is not about your partner. So we are, unfortunately, we want comfort. And that's not unfortunate, but what's unfortunate about it is that we seek comfort at any cost, and in a rather, I want to say cliche, but in a rather obvious codependent way. To be codependent is to be overly focused on other. It naturally makes sense. There's this goodness to our mind. There's this ability for our mind to problem solve. If we have some basic intelligence about us, we can say, well, heck, where is this coming from? What happened? This happened. That happened. This happened. Oh, and then when this situation occurred with my partner, I'm feeling that there's in this emotional separation, emotional distance. I'm feeling that there is not a vulnerability being shared like perhaps there once was. And then it's triggered in my nervous system. I'm feeling distress. I'm feeling fear. I'm even feeling angry that I'm being denied vulnerable connection. So even to language it like that, I'm being denied, implies that the power is in the other person and that it is their job to make me feel vulnerably connected. When that happens, usually we shore up, we strengthen our focus on the other person, and we inventory how he or she is failing us, has failed us, will continue to fail us, and then we conclude that because they are failing us, it is their job to fix this and to rectify it, and if only he or she was more vulnerable, if only he or she would be able to acknowledge my feelings and give me what I want, then I wouldn't have to manage my own discomfort and my own emotional distress. Now, what I am talking about is really tricky. It's not black or white, and it happens contextually within certain situations. So it requires a certain level of sophisticated thinking to really be able to look at, well, what is the big picture here? So I'm not implying that we are to endure being treated unfairly and be with a partner where emotional connection and emotional availability is lacking. What I'm pointing out is that when we notice this, instead of taking care of ourselves, we usually feel compelled to focus on the other person and to let him or her know that they're lacking. You're lacking. You are falling short. You do not offer the vulnerability that you once did. You are withholding at this point, or even drawing some conclusions of psychoanalyzing your partner and saying, well, obviously you're treating me like this because this is how your mother treated you, and now you're projecting that onto me. And the same way that your mother denied you emotional warmth and comfort and connection and vulnerability, you're denying me that same warmth. You see, you have a problem, and if you would go to therapy and if you would address your situation, you would be able to give me the love I deserve. And until you do this, and until you are able to acknowledge that you are withholding and denying me feeling the connection that I want to feel, and because you're not taking care of my emotional state and making the discomfort, the uncomfortable feeling go away, therefore it's your fault and you are lacking, you are inadequate. So that's the message that a partner is hearing. Underneath it for us, it's a very misguided attempt to try to get relief, and it's a very misguided attempt to try to tell a partner, hey, I'm drowning here, I need a lifeline, I need connection, I need deeper emotional, vulnerable awareness and presence, and when I don't get it, my nervous system lights up and I am uncomfortable, I am physically in pain of feeling a sense of urgency and concern and distress. Please help me in this place. But we usually lack the ability to say that because our partner repeatedly is not hearing us, because the very nature of this dynamic is they're not picking up on the request for emotional connection. And you might try this once in a soft voice. You might try this twice through being demonstrative and trying to get a hug. You might try this a third time by being a little sarcastic. You might try this a fourth time by making a joke about it. You might try it a fifth time by being demanding and really saying, I need you to show up differently, and I need you to give me a little more emotional presence and reassurance and engage me in emotional conversation. So by the sixth time, by the seventh time that you've attempted, And for many people, unfortunately, and this is true, and it's also sad, and it's also telling, some of us, we could say by the 476th time, by the 647th time, we get stuck where we're trying every possible way to explain to a partner, please show up. What happens after you do this a dozen of times or so, you get angry and you get bitter and you get resentful and you get frustrated. So that's when protest behavior comes in. And that's when we're passive aggressive. And that's when we're aggressive. And that's when we're judgmental of our partner. And so then we outright start belittling our partner by directly telling him or her, well, you emotionally are not very old. You emotionally are somehow stunted in your growth, and you need to step up to the plate. So we do it with a harshness, and we do it with a demand. And still underneath it, in our own sense of righteousness, because we feel so hurt, in our righteousness, we can even convince ourselves that we're being honest and truthful. And say, see, I'm really blurting out my truth by telling you that you're lacking and that you're inadequate. I'm really in my truth. I'm being so clear, saying that this is the level of emotional connection that I need. You're falling short, and it's because there is something in your maturity and your lack of development that you have not looked at, and you're failing me. And I feel compelled, I feel a sense of conviction in pointing out this truth. Now, you realize that's an insult, and you realize you're belittling the worth of your partner. I'm not denying that it's true or untrue. And for the sake of this moment, of this idea, let's pretend it's true. So you've picked a partner who is who withholds vulnerable presence, who withholds emotional availability. That's who you picked. That you have chosen this particular person. And let's assume that there's no confusion about love. Everybody loves each other. But see, the problem here is that that's what we link our idea of love and caring. That, well, if you don't do this, if you don't take care of my difficult feeling and help me feel better in my emotional distress, well, then obviously you don't love me. And then we're sucked into black and white thinking. So let's assume that, yes, your partner is very much lacking in this area. It is not your job to be the person to tell him or her that they're lacking. The reason is because we're usually it's a very high percentage. This isn't research that I've read, but just, logically, it's a very high percentage. Many of us are not coming from an altruistic place. We say that we want to help, and we say that we're, sharing our truth, and we just believe in authentic openness. But really what's underneath it is we're still manipulating the conversation to get our needs met. You got to connect with me. And notice my hand. This is protest behavior. This is the temper tantrum. So we might be sophisticated in our intelligence. We might be sophisticated in our language. We might be sophisticated in our ability to listen. We're really, offering all these good skills. But what's driving it underneath is we're having a temper tantrum, and we're protesting, and we're trying to negotiate a power struggle to say, I need more, you're not giving it to me, and it's your job to give it to me. And then until you do, I'm going to be bitter and resentful and have a temper tantrum. And I might not show that to you, but you're going to feel it. And it will come across in my icy coldness. It will come across in my rejecting you at times when you attempt to reach out. It will come in times when you actually initiate connecting to me, and I will remind you of the 22 times previously that you have failed. I'm keeping score here. Don't forget that. So, everything I'm talking about undermines trust. We are now engaged in an interaction where we are deteriorating trust. We are undermining trust. We are eroding. That's the word I want. We are eroding trust in our relationship. And so do you hear the illogicalness and the confusion and the mixed messages that are going to be sent to your partner? So on one hand, you, on the surface, very overtly and directly are saying, I need emotional connection. I invite you to step up your game. I want you to connect with me on a different emotional level. And I'm so ready. I'm so ready. Let's make this work. However, the delivery of how I do it will simultaneously tell you that you're inadequate and you're lacking and you gotta step it up. This undermines trust. This does not make the other person feel safe. And this does not make the person feel vulnerable. It makes the other person feel guarded and feel defensive. And chances are, if this person is already emotionally limited in their initiating emotional engagement, we can pretty much guarantee that they're completely shutting the door. And their own shame will enter, their own insecurity enters, their own fear. So even though the person appears to be aloof and distant and, going with the flow and not really, just not wanting, very avoidant. I mean, in this dynamic, we're talking about in that moment, the avoidant, the person who's emotionally avoidant, they're going to appear to be aloof, and they're going to appear to not need to engage, but we can pretty much guarantee what's underneath for them in their nervous system is the same amount of fear and the same amount of distress and the same amount of panic around this impasse, this disconnect of emotional availability. And they too don't know how to respond. So as much as in this dynamic, as I'm pointing this out, if I'm the one who's being more demanding and then the other more avoidant type person is now responding through more shutting down, if I increase my protest behavior, they're going to increase their avoidance and they're shutting down. And so here, that's what we have, the classic push-pull, the very beautiful, the distancer and pursuer dance, where the pursuer is saying, well, let's turn up the volume, let's turn up the volume, let's more. And we have the distancer saying, nope, turn the volume down, like I'm out of here, like let's just lay low, let's just distance, let's just, can't we just all get along and sort of go through the motions and smile a lot? Or the person totally checks out, and then they are physically avoiding their partner, not calling, just not making plans. What's happening for everybody is everyone's nervous system, everyone's attachment system is triggered, and we're all stewing and marinating in fear. Painful stuff. The point of this whole video is that oftentimes when we get in this stalemate and when we get in this paralyzed state of failing each other and eroding trust, it is so common to make it about the other person and to believe that if only they had this skill and that skill and went to therapy and did this and learned this, if only they could do this, then my needs will be met. The point of this video, not so much to reconstruct how we get out of this mess, but to focus on the first piece in the puzzle of how we get out of this mess, which is focus on yourself in the first place, or the beginning of that means you have to handle your own distress. If you're a mess, if you're freaked out, if you have attachment distress, if you have panic, if you don't trust your partner, that's about you. That's not about your partner. And to be able, if you are focusing, if you're taking an inventory of how your partner is lacking, it can be very helpful to shift that dynamic and say, no, you're lacking. This is about, I'll flip into talking about myself. This is my lack of being able to manage my own discomfort and the profound grief and loss when my emotional needs for attachment and my needs for emotional attunement are not being met. And that is so painful and so hurtful. That's about my lack to comfort myself and soothe myself and to manage those feelings. It's not about being overly focused on what the heck is going on with the other person and how he or she has failed me. It's about how I need to shore up my own skills to take care of myself. Now, in me describing that doesn't solve the relationship. So even if we up the ante here, or we up the intensity of what's happening, let's say we're actually in an abusive scenario where it's very detrimental to my spirit and my spirit's wilting, I'm losing my sense of self, and I'm just with a partner who, I'm not even going to say the partner's abusive, but I'm going to say this kind of dynamic is abusive. I still have to solve that I'm in a not so good relationship. I have to solve that I'm in a relationship that actually is detrimental to me, and still make real world concrete plans around, do I stay or do I leave? And usually we get stuck looping in, do I stay, do I leave, do I stay, do I leave? And because we are already have this attachment injury, this attachment trauma, this wound around our attachment system, we tend to stay stuck looping in that place much longer than we should, and or much longer than other people who don't have attachment injuries, because we fail to be able to have our own wherewithal, our own agency, our own real foundational secure sense of self that says, thanks, but no thanks. I love you. I know you care about me. You're a good person. I'm a good person. But this quality, this dynamic of how we connect, it's not what I'm looking for. I need to go. Thank you so much. I leave in kindness and I wish you well. Usually we can't do that. Instead, what we say is, I am not going to trigger my own abandonment feelings from my attachment injury, so therefore I will stay stuck in this dynamic and I will prove it wrong, and I am in it for the long haul, and I believe in this crazy notion of relationship forever. Forever gets us in trouble. If you believe a relationship is supposed to be forever, what it means is that you're signing up to, be in a unsatisfactory, abusive, dynamic. I'm not necessarily saying the other person is abusive, but this dynamic, when we know it's hurtful to us and that it fries my nervous system, it turns on, it activates my anxiety, it activates my distress, and I really don't have tools to manage it. I just do not have the ability to comfort myself and soothe myself and work on my own relationship skills. I'm projecting onto the other person, hey, partner, you need to save me. You need to be my parent. It's your job to make me feel better and to be okay with my attachment distress. Again, I'm going to repeat a point that I made at the beginning. There is a biological component where, we do actually, there are certain biological systems, specifically around our nervous system, our breathing, even, the apparatus of breathing, when we're when we're attuned with someone, we're even breathing in the same way, like people who sleep together in the same bed. I mean, think of, women who get on the same menstrual cycle. This idea that our biology, our bodies are able to mirror each other. And there is a kind of truth to then this, a biological idea of becoming one. And it could help regulate our heartbeat. It helps regulate our overall health. So we do acknowledge there's a goodness we can rely on, that we do need the other person to co-create a healthy exchange of emotional connection so that we both feel nourished and that we feel valued in this relationship. However, if I don't know how to manage the painful, uncomfortable moments when that is not happening, when there is a disconnect, when my partner is failing me, when I'm failing my partner, or just by right of circumstance. I mean, so many people struggle with the realities of how life leaks into a relationship. And what I mean is priorities, other people, such, children in the family, jobs, the demands that a job will place on a partner, and then one partner feels rejected or put out, or, I'm no longer the priority, your job takes precedence, you must not care about me because you stay at the office so late all the time. Now, certainly that, might be, that might be a way that your partner avoids you. But we're not looking for drawing the conclusion. We're looking for the ability to negotiate and stay in communication about it. And instead of being accusatory towards a partner and saying, see, you're using your job as a distraction to substitute having emotional connection with me. Instead, we need to have a softened startup. We need to come from a place of compassion and kindness and really genuinely have an open mind, not have rigid thinking. But this whole thing that I'm talking about, this power struggle and not getting our needs met, it solidifies rigid mind. We get really, really rigid and tight and limited. And although our presentation might appear like we're safe, our mind is really punitive. And our mind is really not allowing, there's not too much space here for making it workable. We need to be able to come to a partner and say, I'm noticing how we spend less time together, and we have to lead with ourselves first. We have to acknowledge, well, how am I unavailable? And I throw that out, and this is what's referred to as a softened startup. We do not begin by being accusatory. We do not begin by telling our partner that he or she is lacking or inadequate. We do not lead from our freak out and our fear. And we do not lead from a demand. You need to make me a priority. You always stay at the office late. You come home at 7 o'clock and I haven't had dinner yet and I'm hungry and I was waiting for you and now I don't even feel like eating dinner with you anymore. If that's the approach, if that's what we're leading with, we can guarantee the partner is not going to feel safe, is not going to feel vulnerable, and is not going to want to eat dinner with you. And is probably going to reinforce, the partner wants to stay at work until 7 o'clock tomorrow. So we need to have the ability to soften our own protest behavior, look at how we're demanding. And in those moments, we are coming from our very immature place. We are coming from our younger self. That usually we can think of this as a very younger part of who we are or who we once were in our families, and we are protesting. We're saying, don't treat me like this. Don't treat me like this. I need more. I need more. It will not help you or serve you if you are so activated in your and holding on to a rigid mind, and you're engaging in a power struggle where you have to be right and you're fighting to get your needs met. You're guaranteeing that that's not creating an environment conducive to openness and free thinking and being gentle and kind and compassionate, and your partner's not going to want to engage. So before you even start, you have the, underneath it is a very valid and good need and desire to have emotional connection and to be vulnerable. But the way in which you're asking for it is actually pushing the other person away and shutting the other person down. One more idea, we also have to think of the other person might not have the skill, no matter how incredibly skilled you are in presenting it, the other person also might just not have the skill to hear any feedback or to even be able to engage the conversation. Again, that's the moment where you really have to have a heart-to-heart with yourself, and in a very matter-of-fact way, not an overly emotional way, not in a dramatic, confused, romantic way, but in a very practical, the same way that you buy a car, the same way that you buy a house, the same way that you decide to, invest in, buying some, open a savings account. You just have like, well, is this the best choice for me at this time in my life to be in this relationship? Because this is where we're both at in our skills. And we need, everybody to get on the same page and to be able to share their vulnerabilities, to say, hey, honey, I want to let you know that I feel some panic when my emotional needs are not getting met. And I have to work on that, and I experience a desire to then tell you what's wrong with you. And I expect you to make me feel good. And when that happens, I'm putting so much demand and pressure on you. And I will do this through resentment, and I will do this through being passive aggressive, and I will do this by telling you that you are lacking in certain skills. And really what's underneath it is I'm feeling so much fear in our relationship. And I really need to ask, how can we negotiate reassurance, and how do we negotiate paying attention to identify that everybody has some reassurance needs? And we need to take an honest assessment of looking if we're graphing these in a chart and doing like two wave graphs, and one is going to be your partner's availability and ability for emotional engagement, and then your ability for emotional engagement, and also your desire of how much, the frequency of emotional connection that you would like, and then the same thing for your partner. And we have to really assess in a very practical way, is there overlap? Does it really connect? Are we falling within the same range of is it viable? And that's the answer of whether or not this relationship can survive. If you both fall way beyond, there's really no common ground, and you don't have a way for a softened startup to lead with your own lack, to lead with your own fear, to lead with your own inadequacies, to lead with your immaturity. And when I say lead, I mean to acknowledge it, to lay your cards on the table. And if your partner cannot meet you halfway, to also do the same. Well, we can say these two people are not compatible. You're not going to be able to be in a relationship because you're not even able to come together to work out this level of needs and vulnerability. It's a bit of a paradox. You need to be vulnerable to work out becoming more vulnerable. You need to trust in order to work out the feelings of mistrust. And that's a paradox, right? And most of us don't want to do that. We want to stay guarded, and we want to have our hand, it's like, well, I'm not going to trust you until you prove that you're trustworthy. It doesn't work like that. We have to be willing to share our mistrust and have enough trust to work out the bumpy moments and the fear of mistrust. I hope this video is helpful to you. I'm trying to map out some of the gridlock that occurs in this dynamic, and how we so much get overly focused on thinking the other person is the problem and he or she needs to change. And the point of this video is to say, nope, it's about you. You need to change. You need to look at how, what degree you're bringing to the table, and how are you working with your own discomfort. I hope that the video was helpful. Please subscribe if you like like this video, more videos like this to come. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, to give you a heads up, I'm creating a new subscription membership site called Improve Your Relationships. It's the same name that I give to my videos, Improve Your Relationships, but it's rooted in a community. It's a social networking platform similar to like Facebook. It looks very similar to Facebook, but it's a community. It's going to be a closed community, a limited number of people, where we really get a chance to talk about these ideas.